Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The city always smelled like old rain and desperation, a mix Silas knew well. He collected debts, not the friendly kind. People owed him, or rather they owed the guys he worked for, and Silas made sure they paid. No excuses, no sob stories, just money, or whatever else he could take. He was good at his job, too good, some might say. His office was a small, grimy room above a pawn shop, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you had to. Today, Owen Barrett was supposed to be there. Owen, a mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a gambling problem bigger than his garage. He owed a lot. He was late. Silas tapped his pen on the worn desk, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Where is he, Elias?" he asked his associate Elias Monroe, who was slumped in a chair, scrolling on his phone. Elias was good at finding people, less good at getting them to show up on time. Elias grunted, not looking up. Said he'd be here. Maybe he's stuck in traffic. Quote, a few minutes later, the door creaked open, and Owen shuffled in, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His clothes were rumpled, and his eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, avoiding Silas's cold gaze. "Silas," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. Quote, Owen wrung his hands, his knuckles white. I don't have it. Not all of it. Just a little more time, please. My daughter, she's sick, and the medical bills." His voice trailed off thick with a plea Silas had heard countless times. Silas leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his expression unchanging. "Owen, I heard that story last month, and the month before. Your daughter, your sick mother, your broken-down car. It's always something, isn't it?" He picked up a small, heavy wrench from his desk, one of Owen's own tools he'd taken as a reminder of the debt. He tossed it lightly in his hand, the metal glinting under the dim office light. "This wrench, Owen, it's worth more than your word right now." Owen's face went pale, a sickly gray. "Silas, please, I'm begging you. I'll get it, I swear." Quote, Owen's eyes hardened. A flicker of something Silas hadn't seen before, resentment maybe, or something worse, a spark of defiance in the depths of his fear. "You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Quote, Owen left, his shoulders slumped, but that flicker in his eyes stayed with Silas. He dismissed it. They all looked at him like that eventually. It meant nothing. Later that week, Silas was on his way to collect from Lila Bennett, a florist who'd borrowed heavily to keep her shop afloat. She was a sweet woman, always smelled like roses and despair. Silas knew she was struggling, but that wasn't his problem. The money was. He found her shop closed, the lights off. Strange. It was usually bustling even this late. He tried the door, locked. He knocked, then knocked harder, his knuckles rapping sharply against the glass. "Nothing." Quote, suddenly, the back door of the shop burst open and Spencer Reed, a burly guy who used to be a bouncer, came out, his face grim. He was one of Lila's cousins, Silas thought. He owed Silas, too, from a bad poker game a few months back. Spencer looked different now, less arrogant, more determined. His jaw set. Quote, Silas laughed, a short, humorless sound that scraped against the silence of the street. "Oh, I see. You're going to be a hero, Spencer. You think you can stop me?" He took a step back, assessing the situation. Quote, Silas's heart gave a jolt, a sudden, cold rush of understanding. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an ambush. Quote, Owen lifted the pipe, his grip tight. "The only mistake was letting you live this long, Silas." They moved fast. Spencer tackled Silas, sending him sprawling onto the grimy alley floor. The blade was useless in his hand, knocked away as Owen brought the pipe down. A searing pain exploded in Silas's head, then another and another. He tasted blood, felt the world spin, the concrete cold against his cheek. Faces blurred above him, contorted with rage and something else. Relief. Darkness swallowed him whole. The next thing Silas knew, he was standing in the alley. It was night, but everything was wrong. The air was colder, sharper, biting at nothing. The sounds of the city were muffled, distant, like they were happening in another world. He looked down at his hands. They were translucent, shimmering slightly, like heat haze. He tried to touch the brick wall beside him, and his fingers passed right through it, as if it were made of smoke. A cold dread, unlike any he'd ever known, settled over him, deeper than any debt. He was dead. They had killed him. But he wasn't gone, he was here, and he felt a new kind of hunger, a thirst for something more than money. He felt a burning desire for them to feel what he felt, to know what it was like to lose everything, to be helpless. His first target was Owen. He found him at his garage working late, trying to fix a sputtering engine. Owen looked tired, but there was a lightness in his movements Silas hadn't seen before. He thought he was free. Silas slipped through the wall of his garage, unseen, unheard, a ripple in the air. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and Owen shivered, rubbing his arms. "Just a draft," he muttered to himself, oblivious. Owen bent over the engine, his brow furrowed in concentration. Silas focused his will. A new, strange power thrumming through him, a cold energy. The lights in the garage flickered, then died, plunging the space into absolute darkness. Owen cursed, fumbling for his flashlight, his heart beginning to pound. "What the—" Silas was right behind him. He whispered Owen's name, his voice a dry, rasping sound that only Owen could hear, a sound that seemed to come from inside his own head. "Owen?" Owen froze, his breath catching in his throat. He spun around, shining the flashlight beam wildly. It passed right through Silas, illuminating only empty air. Owen's eyes widened, seeing nothing but feeling a presence, a heavy, suffocating cold. Silas wanted him to feel it, the fear, the helplessness. He wanted him to relive the moment he realized he was trapped, the moment he knew he couldn't pay, the moment he felt his life crumble. Suddenly, the garage door slammed shut with a deafening clang that echoed through the dark space. Tools clattered to the floor as if thrown by an unseen hand. The air grew heavy, pressing down on Owen, making it hard to breathe. Owen stumbled back, his face a mask of pure terror. He dropped the flashlight and it rolled away, its beam dying as it hit a wall, leaving him in absolute darkness. Then the whispers started. Not Silas's voice, but the voices of Owen's creditors, the threats Silas had made, the cold, hard words that had driven him to desperation. They echoed in the darkness, growing louder, swirling around him, a chorus of his own failures. Owen screamed, a raw guttural sound that tore from his throat. He clawed at the garage door, trying to open it, but it was sealed shut, an invisible force holding it fast. He was trapped, just like Silas had trapped him in life. Silas watched him, a cold satisfaction spreading through his ethereal form. Owen collapsed against the door, sobbing, his body racked with fear, his mind breaking under the weight of the spectral torment. The whispers intensified, pressing in on him, dragging him back to his worst nightmares, forcing him to relive every agonizing moment of his downfall. And Silas was the conductor of his torment. But as Silas watched Owen break, a new thought, a chilling idea, began to form in his spectral mind. This wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. There were others, and Silas had all the time in the world. The city, with its dark alleys and hidden secrets, was about to learn that some debts even death couldn't erase. And Silas was just getting started. What would happen when the others realized their tormentor was back from the grave? The morning after, Owen Barrett was found huddled in a corner of his garage, shaking uncontrollably. His eyes were wide and unfocused, staring at things no one else could see. He mumbled about whispers, about debts, about a cold that sank into his bones. His friends Spencer Reed and Callum Hayes tried to talk to him, but Owen was gone, lost in a waking nightmare. The doctor said it was a severe psychotic break, brought on by extreme stress. They didn't know the half of it. Silas, unseen and unheard by the living, observed Owen from a corner of the garage, a cold, satisfied hum resonating through his spectral form. Owen's broken mind was a symphony of fear, and Silas was the conductor. But Owen was just the opening act. There were others, many others. Silas's next target was Spencer Reed. Spencer, the bouncer who had tackled him, the one whose hands had been the first to lay violent claim. Spencer worked security at a club downtown, a loud, pulsing place filled with flashing lights and throbbing music. Silas found him in the VIP section, watching the crowd with a practiced, bored gaze. The air around Spencer grew subtly colder, a chill that made the hairs on his arms stand up despite the warmth of the crowded club. He shivered, glancing around. "Someone leave a door open?" he muttered to a colleague who just shrugged. Silas focused, and the bass in the music began to distort, a low grinding sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Then the lights flickered, not just the club lights, but every light, creating jarring, disorienting flashes. People started to look around, confused. Spencer frowned. "What's going on with the sound system?" he asked, pulling out his walkie-talkie. "Hey, sound booth, you getting this? The bass is clipping." A voice crackled back. "Everything's fine on our end, Spence. Must be the old wiring again." Silas smiled, a chilling, unseen expression. He knew the wiring wasn't the problem. He pushed harder. The music suddenly cut out, plunging the club into a strange, unsettling silence, broken only by the murmurs of the confused patrons. Then a high-pitched whine started, growing louder, piercing like 1,000 tiny needles in Spencer's ears. It was a sound only he could hear, designed to chip away at his sanity. Spencer clapped his hands over his ears, his face contorting in pain. "Make it stop," he yelled, but no one seemed to notice the sound. They only saw him clutching his head, looking distressed. Spencer pushed him away. "Can't you hear that?" The colleague looked confused. "Hear what? It's quiet now." The whine intensified, drilling into Spencer's skull. He stumbled back, his eyes wide, sweat beading on his forehead. He felt a phantom pressure on his chest, as if an invisible weight was pressing him down. He saw flashes of Silas's face, not as it was in life, but distorted, spectral, grinning. Suddenly, the VIP ropes, which had been securely fastened, snapped loose, and a surge of people pushed forward, almost trampling Spencer. He lost his footing, falling hard, his head hitting the polished floor. The high-pitched whine was replaced by a chorus of angry, demanding voices all speaking at once, all accusing him. Not the voices of the club patrons, but the voices of the people Silas had collected from, the ones Spencer had tried to protect, now blaming him for their suffering. Spencer scrambled to his feet, disoriented, trying to push through the unseen crowd. He knew these voices. He knew the guilt they carried. He was reliving every moment he'd felt helpless, every time he'd seen someone he cared about suffer because of Silas. Meanwhile, across town, Callum Hayes, the former boxer, was at his small, rundown gym. He was hitting the heavy bag, trying to work off his own anxieties about Owen. He hadn't heard from Spencer since the club incident, and a creeping unease had settled over him. As Callum threw a powerful jab, the gym lights flickered. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Power surge," he mumbled. He resumed his training, but the air felt heavy, charged. Suddenly, the old radio in the corner, which had been off, crackled to life. It wasn't playing music. It was broadcasting static mixed with a distorted, slurred voice that sounded vaguely familiar, yet utterly alien. It was Silas's voice, twisted and guttural, whispering threats that seemed to come from the very walls. Callum froze, his fists clenched. He knew that voice. It was impossible. He tried to tell himself it was a trick of the mind, the stress getting to him. He grabbed a baseball bat and swung it wildly at the radio, smashing it to pieces. The voice stopped, but the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, intensified. He heard a faint scratching sound coming from the locker room, like fingernails dragging on metal. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He was a fighter, but this was something he couldn't hit. He slowly approached the locker room door, his hand shaking as he reached for the knob. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, as if something was desperate to get out. He flung the door open, revealing nothing but empty lockers. But as he stood there, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, despite the windows being shut. The lockers began to slam open and shut, one by one with increasing speed, creating a terrifying rhythm. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a shadow detached itself from the wall, elongating, twisting, forming a vaguely human shape. It drifted towards him, a chilling silence preceding its movement. Callum backed away, his breath ragged. This wasn't a dream, this wasn't stress, this was something else entirely. He had helped kill Silas, and now Silas was back. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He turned to run, but the shadow was faster. It enveloped him, and he felt an icy grip on his throat, a pressure that stole his breath. He saw flashes of his past, his boxing career ending, the debt mounting, Silas's cruel smile. He was reliving his own downfall, just as Owen had. The others, Tessa Sloane and Lila Bennett, tried to reach Spencer and Callum, but their calls went unanswered. A growing dread settled over them. They knew something was wrong, something far beyond the usual troubles. The city, once a place of refuge from Silas, now felt like a cage. They had thought their problems ended with Silas's death, but it seemed they had only just begun. The true horror was that Silas wasn't just haunting them, he was hunting them one by one, and they had no idea how to fight a ghost, and what would happen when he came for them. The silence from Owen, Spencer, and Callum was a heavy, suffocating blanket that settled over Tessa Sloane and Lila Bennett. They tried calling their phones, sending frantic texts, even driving by their homes and workplaces. Nothing. Owen's garage was dark, Spencer's club shift was covered by someone else, and Callum's gym was locked. A faint metallic smell lingering in the air. The police, when they finally got through, were dismissive, calling it a disappearance and suggesting the men had simply skipped town. But Tessa and Lila knew better. They knew Silas was back. Tessa, usually so composed, paced her small apartment, a stack of old books on folklore and hauntings scattered on her coffee table. It has to be. Owen's breakdown, Spencer's, whatever happened at the club, Callum vanishing. It's too much of a coincidence. Her fingers traced the faded print of a page describing vengeful spirits. But how? We saw him die. They spent days in a desperate, futile search for answers, for protection. They visited dusty old bookshops, consulted with a nervous elderly woman who claimed to read auras, and even tried to talk to a street preacher who spoke of spiritual warfare. Every path led to a dead end or to more fear. The city, once a place of familiar routines, now felt alive with unseen threats, every shadow a potential harbinger of Silas. Silas, meanwhile, reveled in their growing despair. He drifted through the city, an unseen predator, his ethereal form a cold whisper on the wind. He watched Tessa in her apartment, her brow furrowed in concentration as she read, then watched Lila in her shop, her hands shaking as she arranged flowers. Their fear was a sweet melody to him, a new kind of payment. He decided Tessa would be next. She had been so quiet, so unassuming, yet her inheritance had been a significant sum, and he had taken it all without a second thought. He remembered the quiet despair in her eyes when he'd informed her of the final seizure of her assets. Now, he would make her relive it. Tessa was alone in her apartment, the city sounds muffled by the thick walls. She was trying to sleep, but every creak of the old building, every distant siren made her jump. Silas entered, a chilling cold preceding him. The air in the room grew heavy, and the scent of dust and old paper intensified. Suddenly the lights flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. Tessa gasped, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. As the beam cut through the gloom, she saw it. Her bookshelf, usually neatly organized, was in disarray. Books lay scattered on the floor, their pages fluttering as if an invisible hand had tossed them. Then a faint scratching sound began, coming from inside her walls. It grew louder, more frantic, like something trapped trying to claw its way out. Tessa pressed her hands to her ears, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Stop it!" she screamed into the darkness. The scratching stopped abruptly. Instead, she heard a faint rustling sound, like paper being shuffled. She shone her light towards her desk and saw a stack of old financial documents, papers she thought she had destroyed, now laid out neatly. They were the records of her inheritance, every cent, every transaction, every loss. And on the top, in what looked like her own handwriting, was a stark red, paid in full, scrawled across the final, empty balance. A cold, dry whisper echoed in the room, seemingly coming from everywhere at once. "You thought it was over, Tessa. The debt is never truly paid." Tessa screamed, a raw, terrified sound. She grabbed the papers, tearing them, but they reformed in her hands, pristine and mocking. She felt a cold touch on her shoulder, an icy grip that sent shivers down her spine. She spun around, swinging wildly. But there was nothing there, yet the presence was overwhelming, pressing down on her, forcing her to relive the crushing weight of financial ruin. The despair of losing everything she had. While Silas tormented Tessa, word of the strange happenings began to spread through the city's dark underbelly. The disappearance of Owen, Spencer, and Callum, all known associates of Silas, raised eyebrows. Damien Clark, a ruthless figure who controlled a vast network of illicit operations, heard the whispers. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in order, and this was disrupting his business. People were scared, and scared people made bad decisions. Damien sat in his dimly lit office, a cigar smoke curling around his head. Across from him sat Carter Vaughn, a man known for his connections to the supernatural, a shadowy figure who dealt in things most people only read about in nightmares. Quote, Carter Vaughn leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Not just a ghost, Damien. Something more. He's feeding on their fear, twisting their minds. This isn't just a haunting. This is a vendetta." Quote, Carter smiled, a slow, predatory grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I know someone who can. Someone who deals with entities, for a price, of course." A few nights later, in a hidden warehouse on the city's forgotten docks, Carter Vaughn stood before a swirling vortex of shadows and arcane symbols. Damien Clark watched from a safe distance, his face unreadable. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, and the stench of sulfur filled the space. Carter chanted in a language that twisted the tongue, his voice growing louder, more guttural. The shadows deepened, coalescing into a form. It was tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that glowed like embers in the gloom. Its skin seemed to shift, like living smoke, and sharp bony protrusions jutted from its back. This was no ghost. This was a demon, summoned from realms beyond human comprehension. Quote, Carter nodded, his face pale but determined. "Silas. A vengeful specter. He's disrupting the balance. We want him gone." The demon's fiery eyes fixed on Carter, then seemed to scan the very air around them, as if sensing the lingering traces of Silas's malevolence. A cruel smile spread across its smoky features. "A simple task, but the payment will be substantial." Damien Clark stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. "Name your price." The demon extended a clawed hand, its fingers long and skeletal. "The lives of those who summoned me, eventually." Damien didn't flinch. "Agreed. Just get rid of him." The demon's form solidified slightly, its eyes burning with anticipation. "Consider it done." With a ripple of dark energy it vanished into the night, leaving behind only the lingering scent of brimstone and a chilling silence. The hunt was on. Silas, the vengeful ghost, had become the hunted. But what would happen when a ghost met a demon, and who would be caught in the crossfire? The demon, a creature of pure shadow and malice, moved through the city with terrifying efficiency. It left no visible trace, yet its presence was a cold, creeping dread that settled over the streets. Its target, Silas, the spectral debt collector, still reveling in the terror he inflicted, was unaware of the hunter now on his trail, a hunter far more ancient and powerful than any human. While the demon pursued its quarry, Silas turned his attention to Lila Bennett. She was the last of the group, and her fear, a delicate, fragrant despair, was ripe for the taking. Lila was at her flower shop, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but her hands trembled as she arranged lilies, her eyes darting to every shadow. Silas manifested in her shop, not fully visible, but as a chilling draft that made the flowers wilt instantly, their vibrant colors fading to a sickly gray, the scent of roses, usually so comforting, twisted into the smell of decay. Lila gasped, dropping a vase that shattered on the floor. Quote, a dry, rasping whisper echoed around her. "The debt, Lila. It's due." The demon, drawn by the surge of fear and Silas's concentrated energy, arrived. It appeared as a ripple in the air, a distortion that made the streetlights flicker and hum. It sensed Silas's presence, a cold, familiar signature of a disembodied soul. Silas, mid-torment, felt a sudden, profound shift in the air, a coldness that wasn't his own. He turned, his translucent form shimmering, and saw the distortion. It coalesced, and the demon appeared, its eyes like burning coals, fixed on him. Quote, Silas, for the first time since his death, felt something akin to fear. This was not a human. This was something else entirely. "You hunt me?" Silas's voice was a dry hiss. Quote, the battle began. It was not a physical clash but a brutal war of wills, of energies. Silas lashed out with his spectral power, sending waves of chilling dread and phantom pain towards the demon. The demon, however, absorbed the attacks. Its smoky form rippling, seemingly unaffected, it retaliated with blasts of pure dark energy, tearing at Silas's ethereal essence. The fight raged through the city streets, unseen by most, but its effects were devastating. Buildings trembled, windows shattered, and the very air vibrated with unnatural force. The ground cracked in places, and strange guttural sounds echoed from empty alleys. Power grids flickered and died, plunging entire blocks into darkness, only to surge back with blinding intensity. Damien Clark, in his fortified office, watched the chaos unfold on a bank of monitors, his face grim. His vast criminal network was collapsing. Communications were down, illicit deliveries were stalled, and his enforcers were reporting widespread panic and inexplicable phenomena. "What in hell is going on out there?" He growled into a dead phone, the receiver cold against his ear. Nora Ellis, Damien's chief accountant, and a woman who lived by strict rules and ledgers, burst into his office, her usually immaculate hair disheveled, her face pale. "Damien, the servers are crashing, all the data, it's corrupting, we're losing everything." Nora was the meticulous mind behind Damien's operations, the one who kept the books, enforced the fines, and ensured every penny of the syndicate's illicit earnings was accounted for. Her control over the numbers was absolute, and now it was dissolving. Just then, a violent tremor shook the building. A massive crack appeared in the wall, snaking across a framed map of Damien's territories. The lights flickered wildly, then exploded, showering the room in sparks and glass. Silas and the demon were clashing directly above Damien's building, their energies tearing at the very fabric of the structure. Silas, desperate, unleashed a torrent of pure concentrated despair, aiming it at the demon. The demon, in turn, retaliated with a focused surge of pure destructive force. The combined energies ripped through the building, not physically, but metaphysically, corrupting its very essence. Nora Ellis screamed as her meticulously organized financial ledgers on her desk burst into flames, not with fire, but with a cold blue light that consumed them instantly. Leaving only ash, her computer screens flickered to life, displaying gibberish, then exploded, showering her with glass. The digital records, the paper trails, the entire meticulous system she had built to control the underworld's finances was being erased by the supernatural conflict. Her power, her identity, was dissolving before her eyes, reduced to nothing. Damien watched, helpless, as his empire crumbled. The chaos was too vast, too alien to fight. The city's underworld, once a tightly controlled machine, was now a fractured, terrified mess. The rules were broken, the debts forgotten in the face of true, inexplicable horror. The battle between Silas and the demon continued, a silent, unseen war that left the city scarred and terrified. Neither entity showed signs of truly vanquishing the other. Silas, though wounded, was too vengeful to dissipate. The demon, though powerful, found Silas's spectral nature elusive, a target that constantly shifted. Their conflict became a permanent, destructive undercurrent in the city. The city was left in ruins, not by bombs or armies, but by a ghost's vendetta and a demon's hunt. Damien Clark's control was shattered, his criminal network in disarray, his meticulously crafted system of fear and debt utterly destroyed by forces he couldn't comprehend. Nora Ellis, the embodiment of that control, was reduced to a shaking, sobbing wreck, her life's work turned to ash and corrupted data. The living had unleashed something they couldn't control, and now they paid the price. The debts of blood had been collected, but the city would never be the same. There was no victory, only the lingering stench of ozone and despair, a chilling reminder that some wars, once started, never truly end.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share.